Self-improvement. Everyone's tried it, but not everyone's stuck to it. So how did I discover self-improvement? Well, I guess it was my autistic interest in the subject. Now, what is self-improvement? Well, it isn't exactly the act of meditation, journaling, exercise, sleep, all at once when you discover it, but it's rather a lifelong, gradual progression upwards. So what's that mean for me doing it? Well, that means I must have started age 2 or something. When I first got into the education system, when I first joined football teams, when I first joined cricket teams, when I first got into sport in general. I always took the sport I did for granted as a child, and I used to hate going like 3 times a week. But honestly, it's a privilege now that I look back on it, because it was part of my self-improvement journey. Because I realised eventually that not all kids start in the same position as me. I may have had an advantage in that sense, that I started above the other kids in the progression curve of doing sports. I was running so many times a week, I was playing so many times a week, I was socialising all the time. But not all kids start off with that because maybe their parents haven't raised them in a way where they begin sports at a young age, develop and grow bigger, taller, stronger, more muscular as they get older. Some parents just don't have time to handle their kids and they send them off to school and they come back and maybe they play on their phones and they don't have restrictions on their devices, which means they become addicted to social media and laziness. So some people start their journey later rather than sooner. But looking back, I think I've been on it for a very long time. Much longer than the 2 years I believe I was on since I started. See, when I was 18, that's when I actively started meditation. But my sports and sleep were always a huge aspect of my life before then. I had a strict bedtime, I went to bed on time, I slept from 10 PM to 7 AM for school, and even 9 to 7 before I hit puberty, because kids need loads more sleep, especially me with all the sports I did. Got very tired very quickly. So there we've established a beginning of a self-improvement journey, generally from a child's age. So judging by that, most people in my neighbourhood would have started young. But how many people have stuck to it? Now this is where it gets interesting. This is where the committed are divided from the non-committed. This is like when you finish college football or basketball and the rift starts to fall apart. And the people who stick with it, they jump on the train to the destination of fulfillment, of fitness, whereas the others are left behind in mundanity. So what drives the people who are developing in their sport and are interested in pursuing it? Well, either it's from being in a very sporty, active environment, or it's by having an intense passion and perseverance of a certain topic. And who loves to investigate a certain topic deeply? Well, it tends to be people with autism, like me. So that drove my interest in it when I was 18 years old and I started meditating, 17 in fact. Hence, I was the only one who joined that meditation class in school and really begun the active self-improvement journey, not just the passive stuff like the sport I've been growing up playing. Interests like self-improvement, the active kind where you know you're doing it rather than you're subconsciously doing it. Like knowing you have to meditate every day, like knowing you should write something in your journal every day, like knowing you should keep track of your sleep. That is an autistic interest. Although autism as a concept is just the rewiring of the brain, which makes people function more differently in social situations and life. Autistically as an adjective here is used to describe the obsessive, somewhat weird behaviour we use to carry out the task. This is why autistic people often get obsessed with maths or video games. And that's also why they get obsessed with self-improvement. You get it now? Non-autistic people, like normal people or normies, are not so interested in tracking your sleep, writing your journal, meditating every day, reading your books. But I think autistic people get the perspective of it in which they foresee the advantages of it, they do it, and they stick to it for a really long time, autistically, as in the adjective. Oppose this to a normie's behaviour. What would a normie do when they hear about self-improvement? Well, normies are usually stuck in their ways. They watch the news, they like to be consumed in the current affairs generally. They have a few niche interests, but trust me, these aren't too niche. Like, at least 10% of people would know what they're talking about. I would call a normie niche playing FIFA, watching FIFA packs, going to watch football, placing bets, maybe even travelling to Thailand just to go on a lad's holiday, going to Ibiza or Mallorca as their primary source of pleasure, because these are normal activities. The general population love to do this. So what would a normie think when they hear about self-improvement? Well, if you told them about it, they probably judge you. They think, oh, that's so silly, why are you doing that? And as an autistic person who may have found himself in this situation, you kind of just have to shun off the conversation because you don't want to come off as a weird, as an outcast to these normies. So if you're stuck in a situation where you're trying to preach self-improvement, I think you just have to find another environment. You're not going to change their ways, they're not the people for you. So that's what I describe as the psyche of a normie. They're not open to change, they're not adaptable people. They get along with the general population, but they never go deep into their questions or their friendships and relationships. However, there's a whole other side to love, business, travel, relationships, economy, which they just barely scratch the surface of, because you need to further research these topics and ideas in order to become more advanced and experienced at them. So this is where us autistic people flourish. We see the benefits of self-improvement. We know what they can do because we have seen those 0.01% of the population that have tried it, done it, and are telling you to try it now. The normies don't want to change, they won't do it. Us autistic people love it. We want to change. We do what they say. Now, we don't want to necessarily become them because we are our own people after all, but following their advice is somewhat relieving, somewhat enjoyable, because we know their benefits, we change our belief systems in order to like them. So I'll tell myself, I love going for a run, and I'll go for a run. I love hitting the gym, I'll go to the gym. We adapt to that lifestyle, change and grow for the better. The only problems with doing this is, like I've mentioned, the normies will judge you for it. But in this instance, you need to live two different lives. And this is why autistic people like to mask, because they're living two different lives, where they're surrounded by normies in school during the day who have no interest in what they want to do, and they live this other side of life where autistic people mingle with other people who love their topic, but it's a very small niche. This usually comes out in private internet forums. Now, some of them have had a very bad reputation because people love to post all sorts of NSFW content on these forums sometimes, and that's been brought to light. But there's a better side to autistic forums and interests. Self-improvement is one of those forums per se, where a small number of people, a small proportion of a community, actually band together to do self-improvement. And then they do, say, it might be really masculine things like climb a mountain. Or maybe it could be a group of girls where they develop a huge love for cooking a variety of dishes. And that pursuit for niche topics is what drives an autistic person to complete and conquer tasks. This is why autistic people build new markets in the economy. They build success. This is why the iPhone was invented, because a very small proportion of people who like to develop mobile phones banded together, like Steve Jobs with the iPhone. And eventually, people with this kind of autistic power and intelligence used it to create a product that the normies loved. Autistic people come, discover the topic, level up and experience themselves in that topic, and then the normies eventually catch on. Where autistic people go first, normies follow and buy the products. And I believe with the autistic interest in self-improvement now, which does come with its disadvantages by the way, say loneliness, like for example people using monk mode as an excuse to not be sociable, we will pave the way for a new movement where the normies join onto self-improvement. Now, not all of them will go onto it, but a fair few more people will come into the market and experience the benefits for themselves. Given the examples and stories I've told you, can you not see why self-improvement has been hijacked by the people with autism? Can you now see why, where in a comfortable, friendly environment like a neighborhood like this does not breed self-improvement lovers and the pursuit for a better life? Because in an environment where threats are not an issue and financial difficulties are not an issue, why would people thrive? Well, I can tell you, as an example of one myself, it's all down to the autistic interest in the subject, because our brains are fundamentally wired differently, and we find the interests and benefits in these while normies don't. I hope that's given you an insight into why autistic people tend to like self-improvement a lot more than normies. I hope that helps you. Take care, and I'll see you in the next video.